Japanese video game company.
Its hits include enduring series like Final Fantasy and Dragon Quest.
Now, the state-of-the-art technology they have honed for producing games is being used to recreate the lost worlds of early hominids.
Game creator Hashimi Tabata is leading the team who are conjuring up this prehistoric Earth.
We do have comprehensive digital movie-making technology and expertise, but we've had no opportunity to use it for any other application except for making video games. We knew there would probably be many hurdles to overcome along the way, but our team was eager to tackle them. So we accepted the offer right away.
Creating a computer-generated movie begins with storyboarding. Storyboards are made up of sketches. You could call them the blueprint for the movie. The test of skill for a CGI production crew is how well they can translate the storyboards into a compelling film. Based on these storyboards, they must first gather reference materials about prehistoric Earth and its inhabitants.
Hominids, animals, and everything else in the environment must be digitally modeled. So, they assemble and create a huge range of reference material.
These materials are then condensed into concept art, like this. Concept art provides a visual representation of key ideas and moods for the project. All of the creators work from these master design references.
They are critical in providing a shared visual vocabulary for everyone working on the project. Canadian illustrator Naomi Savoy is in charge of the concept art for Out of the Cradle.
Since we're making this time more of an educational-based program, we really had to work closely with anthropologists and experts so that just to ensure really that the things we were making in the program was actually accurate. So we had several visits where experts would actually come in the office and teach us about all sorts of things regarding to that period of time. And we had regular checkups and feedbacks and conversations to make sure that everything was correct. As well, we actually did some extra activities where we were making stones and tools from scratch to see actually how it would feel like to make these things back then and learn the proper way to make it. So that was also pretty interesting.
The CGI in the series is created on the principle of reconstructing the distant past as faithfully as possible. So, the advice of academic experts from various fields is a vital component. Anthropologist Hisao Baba provides overall supervision.
As researchers, we should normally only refer to the things that we are completely sure about. But when it comes to making CGI, we have to take some risks, although we do sometimes hesitate. But by going out on a limb a little, we can show things in a way that's more readily understandable to a general audience. And then the final product provides a basis for exchange of views among many researchers.
The gaming company gave us special permission to film the team as they create the CGI. This is their office. The team that created the CGI for Out of the Cradle is the same team in charge of the famous game series Final Fantasy. These creative talents have taken on a big challenge: to reconstruct a world none of us have ever actually seen.
Let's follow the workflow used to create a computer-generated movie. Using the storyboard as a blueprint, a crude version of the animation, known as a pre-visualization, is created. This previs, as it's also called, acts as a sort of visual script. After that comes the process of making the digital models, known as assets. Then comes the animation process, where movies are made from these assets. The final step in the process is placing them into a scene. Let's take a look at how these processes have unfolded in the creation of the CGI for Out of the Cradle. Our first character is a very early hominid species called Ardipithecus ramidus. It is thought to have walked on two legs and lived approximately 4.4 million years ago. This CGI version of Ardipithecus ramidus is amazingly lifelike. Look at how naturally it moves. The skin and hair textures, as well as the facial expressions, are packed with ultra-realistic detail. It's surprising how a computer-generated image can be so expressive that it feels as if though we saw it in a live-action film.
These are fossil bones from Ardipithecus ramidus discovered in Ethiopia between 1994 and 1995. Numerous reference sources, including the analytical data from these bones, were used to resurrect a 4.4 million-year-old hominid individual in virtual form. To reconstruct the ramidus male, they first created his basic body. Character modeler Kazuaki Iwasawa was in charge of this step.
The process is like building a model from clay, but on a computer.
This process is called digital modeling. The design factors in height, arm length, and other basic body measures of ramidus are determined here. The modeling for the Out of the Cradle series was exceptionally challenging.
I had no idea what this ramidus looked like. So I had to ask the expert researchers a lot of questions about its characteristic ecology, muscles, skeleton, and so on. And based on that, I kept tweaking the outline. I repeated that process again and again.
Iwasawa built the digital model in close consultation with experts. His first attempts were met with harsh critique. Advisory hearings with experts were used to evaluate the digital creation of Ardipithecus ramidus. In order to keep the model as scientifically accurate as possible, experts were asked to check the quality of the CGI at each production stage. Isao Baba is an anthropologist assigned as the overall supervisor for the series CGI. Today, he is assessing the proportions of the latest iteration of Ardipithecus ramidus.
It looks like the hands are a bit too large in this area. They look much bigger than the feet. Don't the hands seem about twice as big as the feet? Why is that? Or is that just because of the lighting?
Baba is unhappy at the hand's proportion relative to the feet.
Regardless of the data, I think we should avoid giving an unnatural impression.
Baba scrutinizes the model closely, right down to the size of the fingernails. The model had to undergo numerous checks like this before receiving final approval.
The way the fingers attach, the proportions of the segments, all those little details. I worked back and forth with the experts, refining it bit by bit to arrive at the final form.
These fine-tuning rounds have taken 5 months. Now the ramidus body model is finished. It's still just a featureless surface, but the shape is perfect. It's time for the next step in the process to begin.
Ramidus was an erect bipedal primate that lived 4.4 million years ago. Its gait was slightly different from modern apes and modern humans. How can that be recreated? Next comes a process called setup.
Though the character model is completed, it is still static like this, so we need a few tricks to get it to move.
He adds bones and joints to the digital body. These give the model its range of motion. But that bending looks pretty unnatural.
Basically, after the first processing, when the joints flex like this, some parts still stretch out too thin or shrink too short. So we correct them all. But it's a tricky job to fix the body parts in motion into smooth, natural shapes.
Here is the leg after some corrections. Now the flesh looks natural. This process demands a keen understanding of human body anatomy.
If the bones move like this, then what should the shapes of the bending parts look like? That's my daily struggle.
Now, thanks to a skeleton with joints, the Ramidus model is able to move. The next challenge is its bipedal walking, the species' most important trait. Motion capture techniques are used to digitally simulate the gait of Ramidus. A live human actor's movements are recorded, and that data is used to animate the digital character. The actor's movements are captured with an array of over 100 specialized cameras. To ensure accuracy of the movements, supervising anthropologist Isao Baba also attends the motion capture session. He provides instructions on how to walk.
The force of the feet pushing the earth backward should not be very strong. It's somewhat like an elderly person's walking style. Say an 80-year-old. Think of it that way.
Not much backward force, so should I move like this?
That's it. That's about right. Let's try it.
Rolling.
A motion capture system makes it possible to assess in real time the subtleties of how the movement translates to the digital model.
The legs are a little too far apart. Can you bring them closer together?
Okay, rolling.
The movements are recorded over and over, with fine adjustments made each time.
Okay, rolling. Okay, rolling.
There shouldn't be alternating swinging of the arms. Your arms would dangle like this, just the part from the elbows down.
Okay, rolling.
It's not easy mimicking an ancient walking motion that no one has ever seen. An hour goes by in a flash.
The way the arms swing is not quite even, but that may actually add some personality. The left arm seems to swing a little longer, but slight inconsistencies may be better.
The motion capture data is fed into the digital model.
The result is a stripped-down digital animation. This is a pre-visualization, or previs. 4.4 million years after it last walked Earth in the flesh, Ardipithecus ramidus starts walking again, on a computer screen. Its movements are so convincing already, but there's still more work to be done.
Even though we can get the movement from the motion capture, it's not perfect yet. There are little glitches in how the cameras pick things up, and it doesn't capture fingers. See how the pointer finger is off? How it doesn't make contact with the ground?
Motion capture will always leave some unnatural glitches in the movement. Those have to be corrected manually, one by one. Kawamura has a technique to make the movement look more believable.
In the case of computer-generated images, if for example, the fingers touch down rigidly, it will just look fake. Actually, a little bit of flattening motion or some more tensions in the pushing motion are absolutely necessary. If you don't add those little details to the character's movements, the finished animation will lack realism, looking wooden and fake. That is, very much like CGI.
Kawamura filmed his own hand movements to carefully observe how the joints and muscles behave. And then he used that information to improve the animation.
There's a lot of trial and error. Until you actually see it animated, you can't tell exactly what the range of movement should be, where to pump it up or tone it down. Okay, rolling. In this motion capture session, they have to record an even more challenging movement, running.
Here, we really don't get the impression he's running fast.
It's hard to run fast when you can't push your legs backward.
Right, it's all in the glutes.
Because Ramidus lived at the dawn of bipedal locomotion, it was probably not a skilled runner. Therefore, the animation must look appropriately awkward. As a reference, Baba looks at the way gorillas run. Here is the final animation of Ardipithecus ramidus. It certainly looks realistic. Its movement is based on a live human performance, which is then tweaked manually to become even more natural. The virtual Ramidus is looking more and more like a real animal. So what's next? The smooth skin has been covered in fur. And another related step will be essential in making the digital model come alive. The fur must move naturally. Shiho Kobayashi takes charge of the task.
I'm handling the fur simulation. It's the process of physical simulation. We simplify objects, assign them mass, and add the pull of gravity.
The digitally modeled fur is static at first. To make it move, parameters like hair weight, gravity factor, and levels of wind are fed to a computing system to calculate how the fur should move. Kobayashi uses a number of techniques to make each strand of hair behave in a lifelike way. The process is long and intricate, but the results look great. Today, a year and a half since the beginning of the project, the making of the Ramidus CGI is entering its final stage. They still have work to do on the face of Ramidus. Perhaps, more than anything, the face is what will breathe life into this digital model. This tricky final stage is literally a vital, life-giving stroke. Creating the character's face involves multiple processes.
The process is called sculpting. Now we add the fine wrinkles and other details onto the skin.
Much like with a real sculpture, Iwasawa draws in the wrinkles one by one. Old-fashioned artistry unfolds at the heart of cutting-edge CGI production.
I'm taking my inspiration from chimpanzees to model the facial wrinkles of Ramidus. The texture and color of the skin are also modeled after chimps. Each spot and wrinkle is drawn by hand.
After the sculpting process comes surfacing. This adds skin color, spots, and other features. A scientific basis is used in the design of the skin texture.
Since Ramidus lived in the forest, the skin probably wasn't completely dark. I looked through chimp photos and saw ones with spotted skin. So I decided to try that on Ramidus.
Now for the finishing touches.
Now I'm doing what we call the facial setup, the process to add facial expressions to the model. Specifically, I use a trick to get the facial moved by using a combination of different mimetic muscles.
Mimetic muscles is another name for the facial muscles. We modern humans also have mimetic muscles, and by moving them, we create different expressions. To create the digital Ramidus face, 20 to 30 different facial expressions were set up. All of them were modeled after human and chimp expressions. Not even human actors can be so animated.
The nose, mouth, and cheeks, it was painstaking to make those areas expressive.
So what do you think about the outcome?
I wouldn't say it's 100% perfect, but it's in the 60 to 70% range.
Shouldn't the rate be a bit higher?
Maybe. It'll be up to the viewers to decide.
The digital Ramidus now has a very expressive face. It can make more than 50 types of facial expressions through varied combinations of muscular movements.
It's been about 9 months since the work on Ramidus started. Out of a complex series of tasks, the finalized Ramidus has emerged. At last, we can come face to face with the primitive ape-man.
We still need to recreate everything in this virtual world. This shot, for example, requires more than just making the character. Look at the background, the whole collection of trees, shrubs, and grass. The background design needs to reinvent the Earth of 4.4 million years ago. Millions of trees are needed to create this environment.
The most difficult part was figuring out how the habitat of Ramidus should look.
He conducted in-depth research on ancient and modern plants from across the globe, and then created the digital models of necessary plants one by one.
While I was modeling these plants, I always felt unsure about everything. I could not feel relieved until the experts approved the models I showed them.
It's taken 3 whole months to determine the full set of vegetation types to be included in the virtual environment. Then, the plants need to be placed. But can you imagine just how much work is required to fill up even just this one shot?
I'm placing so many objects, but they are all natural things, so they should vary in shape. Environments and locations are all differing factors. For example, in this lot,
Seen from this angle, separately created plants are all placed together. But as similar shapes are bunched, the shot will look unnatural. So you must make individual corrections on each shot. It's a lot of work.
Creating the habitat for Ramidus may have been tougher than creating Ramidus itself. Another technique for making this prehistoric world look real is the lighting.
In the digital world, there is no sense of light until you put one there. There's no sky or sun. This section introduces the sky and the sun that match the world, setting the angles, to incorporate the light and thus give finishing touches to the CGI.
In the dark space, a sky and a sun are placed. By controlling the hue, brightness, and angle of the light, he optimizes the lighting of the scene. Finding the best angle for illuminating the characters is an important job of a lighting specialist. Without lighting, the completed Ramidus model would look like nothing but a black blob. In this scene, the lighting helps create the atmosphere of Ramidus's forest home.
The art of lighting is a big part of making Ramidus come to life. The scene is almost finished. And even these pieces of fruit were the product of thorough research and painstaking work.
This time, I created a type of fruit called Myryanthus.
This is a Myryanthus, or a giant yellow mulberry. It has a knobbed surface and is made up of many layers of pulp.
It is native to Africa and is frequently eaten by chimpanzees. We don't have this type of fruit in Japan.
To create the model of the fruit, Katsuyama collected a lot of reference data about Myryanthus itself, but also about other types of fruit. She gathered not only data, but also bought various different kinds of fruit, and carefully studied them to make the digital Myryanthus more realistic. She seems to be picky about one aspect in particular.
I like texture mapping, so I sort of created my own fruit stand. I built 4 different base models with different patterns, from which I created more variations. That part was a lot of fun.
Katsuyama also created a whole series of models representing varied stages of the fruit's life, from green to ripe to rotten. She spent 2 weeks observing the rotting process of real fruit prior to her modeling work. To make the Myryanthus look even more real, one last touch has been added. Let's rewind. Can you spot the bugs flying around the fruit? That was added by a creator in charge of visual effects. This is Masanori Yamao, a virtual effects designer.
Here's the bug that should be flying around. This model already has its wing flapping animation.
Zoomed in, we can see that it's a fly. That's what's buzzing around the fruit. Even the detailed work of making this small fly buzz around has to be created. He's also particular about something else.
Well, on this animation, I debated whether flies should go near the fruit. Took me a while to work this out. I mean, what happens if they go near each other? because in real life, when bugs get close together, they don't just keep flying. They're actually aware of each other and react accordingly.
These flies are so tiny that some viewers might not even have noticed them. But they give a visual clue to the sweet odor of the Myrmianthus fruit.
The quality of CGI for this program was quite exceptional. I think it's the first of its kind. The overall impression is different. I mean, it doesn't only recreate the body shape, but also the skin texture, the way the fur is slightly disarrayed, and how all these elements change when the character moves. And also the facial expressions. The characters can make a puzzled face, show a sense of danger, or even make a truly subtle expression. All those delicate movements are brilliantly recreated. And the integration of the characters with the environment is also superb. For example, you can really feel that the sun is beating down and how hot it is. You can easily empathize with the characters. You can feel their relief when they reach the cool shade of the trees. I've never seen any computer-generated movie that can
Homo erectus lived 1.8 million years ago. This species had two key traits. The first is that they started hunting other animals as prey. The second is that their body shapes and movements had come to resemble our species much more closely than any earlier ones. Since they look so much like modern humans, a combination of live-action filming and digital recreations were used to reconstruct their life. Location shooting was done in Australia.
Australia was chosen as it offers a variety of pristine natural environments, from desert to forest to coastlands.
This ambitious effort to bring Homo erectus back to life was undertaken by a Japanese production team working alongside filmmakers from Australia and Hollywood. Around 100 people in total were involved in the shoot.
This man is playing Homo erectus, our main character. He is made up with prosthetics before the shoot. Let's take a peek at how the special effect makeup is done.
A prosthetic makeup artist from Hollywood will give the actor a face that turns the clock back 1.8 million years. A special mask restores the raised cheekbones and the brow ridge that are characteristic to Homo erectus. The makeup artist took a cast of the actor's face and, under the guidance of anthropologist Isao Baba, built a mask with these features. After 2 hours on the makeup chair, his modern human face travels back in time to create a 1.8 million-year-old Homo species. The actor's face is now that of Homo erectus. He's also wearing a green cap, so that they can add digital hair later on. Essentially, it's a high-tech wig.
And 3, 2, 1, action!
It's finally time to roll the cameras. First up is a scene of Homo erectus hunting.
The prey is a species that no longer exists, so it will have to be added digitally. For shooting purposes, he stabs his spear into a prop.
When the live-action footage shot in Australia is combined with a digital model created in Japan, it looks something like this. For Mark Riso-Gill, the producer of the Australian shoot, this was a brand new experience.
You know, new people, new experiences, new locations. You know, this is very rewarding for me as a producer. So yeah, it was a great opportunity.
During their month on location, they shot a variety of scenes with Homo erectus. Cinematographer Adam Clark explains the shoot's difficulty.
There have been a lot of VFX elements, and of course, as going out into real locations and shooting, but also having to bear in mind the visual effects, the prosthetics, the post-production side of it. That has challenges of its own right. We've been to the Birwa fields, and we've had to build an 80 by 20 blue screen. And while there's always pressure to shoot in terms of the time, there's also the time you actually are required to get all of those elements together and right, so that at the end of the day, somebody's having to put the composers together actually has the information that they require.
In this scene, a group of Homo erectus feast on meat from their prey. To re-establish a vivid prehistoric world, you need something beyond visuals of ancient species and their habitats. The production also needed to create the right sounds. The right sounds include the speech of Neanderthals and Homo sapiens. Reconstructing the language of our human ancestors was one of the project's daring challenges.
Ka-kupa.
Ka-kupa.
Good, and we want to kind of flow to the next gesture, right? So these would all have been part of a sentence. So ka-kupa.
Ka-kupa.
Yeah.
For advice on the proto-language used by the characters, the team turned to Andrew Berg, a historical linguist.
Now we want to.
But how does he reconstruct something spoken in distant prehistory?
We don't know if the Neanderthals had language. The further along we get within our research, the more likely it seems that they did have language. But we do know a couple things. First off, we know that they were highly intelligent. Second, we know that their anatomy, while slightly different from that of Homo sapiens, was almost certainly tolerant, or is almost certainly permitted the production of speech. Now that speech may have sounded different from that of our own, but it would have been something I would imagine fairly similar.
This scene depicts the possible first encounter between Neanderthals and Homo sapiens, as imagined by researchers. The Neanderthals shout as they run away. What does that mean?
The reason the word for father for the Neanderthals was babu, and I essentially used babbling as an inspiration there. But of course, babies aren't babbling about everything, right? So there are other concepts that a baby's not going to be able to create. So I used onomatopoeia for that. So the idea is that there are certain sounds in the world that we try to imitate, and that becomes the word. And so the idea that that came to me was that to wait is the idea of having 2 feet planting down in the ground, right, in the mud, and that you're waiting, physically waiting there. So the word is kuka, which is created to imitate the planting of feet within the mud.
Another sound that needed to be reconstructed was that of prehistoric music. It can be heard during a scene where a group of Homo sapiens is performing a ritual. Here is the man who created the music of early Homo sapiens.
He is Rupert Till of the University of Huddersfield in the UK. He is both an archaeologist and a composer.
It makes a very deep sound.
He's been conducting research on the music of the Paleolithic era for many years.
I tried to avoid using any sounds or instruments that exist today. These are sounds that are being made as part of a ritual, and the music and the dance and everything comes together. So I try to use natural sounds from the body, clapping, singing, making sounds with your voice, and the instruments we know about, like prehistoric ancient flute sounds.
Till also found something ideal to help achieve the sounds from ancient times.
I was really lucky to be able to go to some caves in Spain, and while we were there, we were looking for rocks that ring when you hit them. And in this cave, we discovered these amazing stalagmites from the ground and stalagmites from the ceiling. And when you hit them, we hit them with a very soft mallet so that it wouldn't damage them. Some of them ring like bells. 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17.
I think it's important to convey actual images of ancient people to the public. As researchers, we try to grasp the past as accurately as possible, based on previous excavations and research. And these technologies are a truly fantastic means of communicating our discoveries to the public.
Thanks to a vast amount of reference material, the expertise and insight of many scholars, and state-of-the-art digital imaging technology, these lost prehistoric worlds have been brought back to life. If a real Ramadus could see this digital model of himself, how would he react? What words of surprise would a Neanderthal blurt out?
Digital images will spark your imagination, and they may perhaps make you feel closer to the prehistoric species.
In Shibuya, Tokyo. Today, the soundtrack for Out of the Cradle series is being recorded. Shu Kanematsu and Takashi Omama are the two talented young musicians who composed and performed the original music for the series. The original score exceeds 40 pieces. 1, 2.
an ambitious project to recreate human evolution in hyper-realistic CGI. A 2-year production of stunning images has been in fact driven by good old-fashioned artistry, contrary to the stereotype image of cutting-edge digital media. In much the same way that human evolution was a long and thorough process, from standing upright, to inventing tools, to acquiring language, and ultimately the arrival of modern humans, this cutting-edge CGI has come to life through painstaking creativity and knowledge, from artists and researchers alike. So for the first time, we can see how this stunning series came out of the cradle.